Hi guys, I'm Erik, and welcome back to Canada Casino, your guide for online gambling. If you're watching this video, it's either because you have trouble controlling your expressions and nervous tics, or you want to get ahead of the game by taking your opponent's body language into account before deciding your next poker move. Eyes, mouth, voice, heartbeat, and hands. Even your entire body can react to whatever's going on in your mind. When you play poker, do you bite your lip, blush when you can't quite get your poker face on, or do you do something else that might give it away? In this video, I'll go through some of the visible and audible signs that you can pay attention to in your own gameplay, and of course, your opponent's. Let's talk about eyes. Eyes can be very expressive and a very good starting point to analyze your opponent. What direction the eyes are looking towards? Does the blinking action seem normal? Do the muscles around the eyes tell us something? Unless the players at your table have the perfect poker faces, yes, the eyes do tell us something, and the players who know their poker faces suck or aren't bothered to keep it up choose to wear sunglasses. By looking at these two main factors, you might be able to increase your edge by just a bit. Gaze direction. Where are our opponent's eyes looking? How fast are these glances? Watching our opponent's eyes carefully, we'll often see them make quick glances in particular directions. At the board, at their chip stack, at our chip stack, all of these carry meaning. For example, our opponent immediately glances at our stack after the turn card. Maybe he caught big and wants to know if we have him covered. Sometimes the absence of looks in certain directions can be telling also. For example, our opponent stoically doesn't check his hole cards for the entire hand, even though we know he typically does. And secondly, fearful eyes. It's usually possible to detect fear along with a range of other emotions. Fear causes the pupils to dilate. Of course, we still need to know what the fear means. Often, our opponent is thinking about bluffing or holds a strong hand, but sometimes it can mean something entirely different, like too many headache pills. Finally, after our opponent has made the bet, he generally has two choices: gaze off into space or make eye contact with us. Again, neither of these carry any meaning in themselves, but if our opponent typically employs option 1 and suddenly switches to option 2, then there's a good chance it has some meaning. Perhaps he's staring us down as a part of an intimidation tactic. Do I have to look aggressive? Just front. Let him. Secondly, mouth tells. Some players believe the mouth is an even more significant tell indicator than the eyes. Look out for the following. Nervous lips. Relaxed lips are generally full and rounded. Tense lips, however, are more likely to be thin and pinched. Once we figure out what this means in the case of the individual opponent, we have an excellent tell indicator. Twitches and micro-expressions. It takes a lot of skill to conceal thoughts and feelings from leaking through our face. Sometimes our true feelings are displayed on our face for a fraction of a second before we get them under control. We can refer to these as micro-expressions, or perhaps even twitches. These small movements are easy to miss, but carry large amounts of information when spotted. Tell 3, heartbeat. The pulse is there, trust me. With the big bucks in the pot, poker's a game that can get the blood pumping. Or, if your opponent is running a big bluff, naturally, our heart rate is going to increase during these moments. It's a good thing our heart rate is imperceivable, right? If you're not a samurai warrior who can control his pulse, chances are that you're as transparent as a plastic spoon that's been degrading for 50 years. Don't get me wrong, it's still hard to spot. It takes a trained eye in at least one of my videos to fully understand what you're looking for. It's worth looking out for the following: increased breathing, visible heartbeat through thin clothing such as a t-shirt, a pulsing vein in the neck or temple, or somewhere else, and symptoms of high heart rate, such as trembling hands or quivering. Think about the type of scenarios that get you involuntarily excited as a player. It's usually not when you're holding some dull mid-strength hand. Well, typically, it's either you've hit it big or you're thinking about running a big bluff. We'll begin to learn what exactly that means for different opponents. Tell number 4. The following is what you want to listen out for. Quality of voice. How does their voice compare to the relaxed style at the start of the game? before any cards were dealt. It's often possible to get some handle on your opponent's mental state through the tone of their voice. When does your opponent vocalize? The decision to talk can be a tell in itself. Remember that we're not required to speak at any point.
You have the right to remain silent.
We can make all of our actions with chips and gestures, and we certainly don't need to involve ourselves in any table talk. Our opponent always vocalizes, but suddenly starts acting silently. What does it mean? Our opponent rarely talks, but he tries to start asking us questions during the big river pot. Does he like to do that when strong or weak? We address our opponents on the river to see if he chooses to respond. We try to gauge him based on the quality of his voice and the content of what he's saying. This technique is known as speech play. It can reveal lots of information, but is generally considered poor etiquette when overused. Chattiness. Did your opponent start off by being chatty, or is he the poor guy who's chatty the whole way through? Some people think poker is about socializing. It's actually about winning, guys. Players that are usually chatty but suddenly go silent is a tell, and players that are generally quiet and suddenly become chatty also mean something's up. So keep on reading those tells, guys. Our next tell are hands. We might think initially to look at whether our opponent's hands are shaky or not. This decision is undoubtedly a good idea, but we've already covered this in our heartbeats section. The hands can convey information in a range of other ways. Handling chips. It's worth taking note of how our opponent puts chips into the pot by default. Does he slide them in gracefully, or does he toss them in forcefully? Does he ever splash the pot? Whether intentionally or not, sometimes players subconsciously make their bets in different ways. Shoving the chips in forcefully while even partially splashing the pot could be considered an intimidation tactic, hoping to elicit folds. Then again, as we've probably realized, poker tells operate on many levels. A player might shove chips in forcefully, hoping to make himself look weak, when in reality, he holds a legitimate made hand. Know your opponent. Card apex. Card apex refers to the amount of time a player spends checking his hole cards after lifting the edges of his card from the felt. This move is often overlooked, but professionals always know to pay attention to this. The length, frequency, even the height of the card apex can often result in extra information regarding our opponent's holding. Chip tricks. What does a player do with his hands when not making a betting decision? Many players like to perform chip tricks while waiting for the action, but this could lead to trouble in some cases. What does it mean when a player who's always performing chip tricks suddenly stops? Of course, he could merely be giving his tired fingers a rest, but it could also be indicative of something more meaningful. Card protectors and miscellaneous items. If we want to avoid giving away any unsolicited information, we need to be completely conscious of all of our activities and make sure no patterns are given away. One commonly overlooked area is the use of card protectors. Card protectors are objects placed on top of hole cards to 1. Avoid their value from being exposed, and 2. To prevent the hand from being incorrectly mucked by an overzealous dealer. Consistency. If we always use a card protector, no problem. If we never use a card protector, no problem either. However, if we sometimes use a card protector and sometimes don't, we need to be very careful that we're not giving away any unwarranted information. If our opponent suddenly stops using this card protector in one isolated hand, what does that mean? Other items. Pretty much anything can be a tell, so we should be on the lookout for all types of physical actions, whether poker related or not. And finally, entire body tells. As much as possible, we want to try and get the whole picture when working our way into our opponent's psyche. Overall demeanor. Imagine a guy who is very laid back, leaning behind, chatting to all the bar staff on the floor while ordering drinks, and suddenly he hunches forward and intently focuses on a hand. What was it that affected that sudden change in his demeanor? Well, we don't know for sure, but if we were to guess, that it has something to do with the cards. Mood. We know one of the players at our table, and he's not his usual self. He seems short and moody. Perhaps it's a result of the downswing. We can often predict what changes certain emotions may have on a player's behavior. For example, what are tilted players more likely to do when compared to normal? Run big bluffs and call down wider. It's that simple. We've seen our opponent's mood and made predictions regarding how his play may differ as a result. Final pointers. It's good to remember that absolutely no tell is foolproof and must always be analyzed in the context of our opponent's default profile. There are plenty of online resources which give us blanket statements such as, if your opponent's hands are trembling, it means he's bluffing. But the truth is that the psychology is a lot less black and white. Keep in mind that skilled actors may also attempt to deceive us with reverse tells. They will deliberately make their hands tremble or use some other physical tells in an attempt to deceive us. So, any tell could mean what we think it means, or the exact opposite. Understanding our opponents well is critical to ending up with the correct results. If you have some experiences of reading your opponent's ticks, or have some ticks yourself that gives your whole game away, I look forward to hearing about it down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, and definitely subscribe for more gambling content coming soon. This is Canada Casino, and I'll see you guys next time.